Alright, so we're back with the D series Vitara build, ready to get this thing in the car. I'm going to get it chained and hooked up to the cherry picker so I can pick it up and get the clutch and transmission on there. If we go over here, I'll show you what parts we're going to put in here. There's the trans, just a stock trans. I did take it apart and put an input shaft bearing in a while ago. This is the clutch setup. This is an ACT HDSS, so the HD means that the pressure plate here is their heavy duty pressure plate. Still has a pretty not bad clutch pedal feel. And then the SS means this is like a street disc, so you can see it's a sprung, still has a sprung disc, and it's not like a 6-puck or anything. It's a full face disc. It's worked really well so far in the car. And then just a stock flywheel. So I think all we need to do, go over here into our clutch alignment tool drawer and figure out which one of these is the right one. And we'll get this thing put together. Alright, so I've got the transmission installed on the engine, put the clutch, flywheel, pressure plate on. I put the rear engine mount bracket on too. I repositioned this thing so that I'm tied into the transmission with the chain so it sits nice and level when I go to put it in. Let me show you total amateur mistake here. I left a bunch of brackets off intentionally. Well, I also left the front engine mount bracket off, and I can't actually get that on with the front cover on. So I'm gonna have to pop this crank pulley back off, take the cover off, and get that bracket on real quick before we go in the car. Alright, so now this front mount bracket is installed and this thing is ready to go back in the car. So this is kind of an awkward process, even with a lift, because I don't have a powertrain table. I've got to lift the car up and kind of position the engine under there, then drop the car back down, then bring the cherry picker in and lift the engine up into the car with the cherry picker. So you'll see how it works. Kind of weird. Alright, so this is what it looks like with the engine positioned in here with the cherry picker on it, ready to get picked up into position. I'm making all kinds of mistakes today. I actually had to take that rear engine bracket that you saw me put on this thing. I had to take that back off. I have no idea why I put it on there. This is the problem when you take something apart a month ago and forget how it came apart. So that bracket bolts into that mount, but I couldn't lift the engine up into place because the bracket hits the subframe. So that had to come out. So let me get this thing jacked up and bolted in. All right, so the engine's sitting in here now by the front mount and the transmission mount. These are all hard race mounts. So I'm going to put the rest of this thing back together, and I will show you all the different modified parts going on this car as we go. So I'll show you the turbo before I bolt it on. This is a Greddy manifold, you can see it right there, and a Greddy 15G turbo. And I did have the turbo rebuilt, and I had the compressor wheel swapped out for a 19T compressor wheel, so it's slightly bigger, and then the exhaust wheel was clipped 15 degrees to compensate for the bigger compressor wheel. And then I took off the stock kind of downpipe elbow that comes on this turbo from Greddy and built this one. The one from Greddy was only 2-inch. So on this one, I've got this one at 2 1/4. That's the biggest I could get because I'm still trying to clear the AC compressor. And then this one is 1 1/2. And then when it comes out here, it's 3-inch. So the whole exhaust system is 3-inch after that. Also on the back of the engine here, I want to point out my the fitting for the oil line going to the turbo. Usually this oil pressure sensor screws right into the block, but this fitting from Track Tough screws into the block, gives you an AN fitting for the oil line, and then gives you a spot to thread your pressure sender into. So that's what I'm using there. So this is what the turbo and manifold look like when they're bolted in. You can see my homemade downpipe elbow, how close that gets to the AC compressor. And if we come over here, I've got the wastegate bolted on. That's it, or the Wastegate Actuator. It's a 5-pound spring in this actuator that came with the turbo. I got the oil line hooked up. There's a 90 here, and it comes over and comes back to that Track Tough fitting in the back of the block. So next I've got to get this wiring harness routed through here. I've got some new heater hoses that are going to go on, and then I've got to get the intake manifold put on. All right, so I got my intake manifold bolted on, and I put the distributor on too. The intake manifold has 700cc injectors. They're Bosch EV14s. And now I'm going to put the car up and put the axles back in and get that going. So let's take a look underneath here. You can see here's my downpipe elbow, and I've got a V-band, and this is the 3-inch downpipe that I made. And I cut the hanger off the stock exhaust, so it still bolts into the stock location at the back of the block there and is supported nicely. And then there's a donut right here so that the exhaust can still flex with the engine and not leak at all. And then the exhaust, I got this kit from True Bends, and so it's a 3-inch mandrel kit that goes all the way back. And then this is a Vibrant Racing straight through 3-inch muffler. You can see here where my intercooler piping comes out of the turbo, and this is 2-inch piping that runs over here. You can see it necks that coupler, it necks up to 2.5, and then it loops around into this Mishimoto intercooler, and then it's 2.5 coming out here all the way to the throttle body through here, and I'll show you more up top there. One more thing to show, the oil return here comes into the oil pan, and this was like a $20 fitting from eBay that allowed me just to drill a hole in the aluminum pan, stick this fitting through, and then thread on a washer. And there's a rubber on the inside of the pan, there's a rubber kind of crush washer that seals it from leaking. All right, so this thing is all buttoned up down below, and I buttoned everything up top here. So I'll show you the rest of the setup. You can see I've got an air intake that I made going into the turbo here with a bracket that goes to the distributor and a rubber bushing to hold the oil line. So everything's nice and solid, and the air filter moves with the engine. This is an HKS blow-off valve. It might be a knockoff. I bought it used. I don't care. It works. You can see the rest of it. This is where the intercooler piping comes in. Comes up from the intercooler 2.5 inch all the way to the throttle body. And then this is something I had to do because the stock IAT sensor plugs into a rubber intake tube, and so I had to go get a sensor from a different model Civic, I forget which one, and then I had a friend, I can't TIG weld, so I had a friend over at FenFab, I'll put a link to his website in the description, weld this bung for me on the intake pipe. I've got this electronic boost controller. It's a 3-port MAC valve. I don't have it hooked up right now. There's a 5-pound wastegate spring in the Wastegate Actuator, and you can see I've just got it run right from reference to the actuator. So we're just going to run 5 pounds to break the engine in, and then this is how I was running 10 pounds before, and I'm going to try to crank the boost up as much as I can later on with this boost controller with the 5-pound spring, and see how far it gets. So now I've got my funnel on the coolant. I'm ready to start this thing up. I am going to unplug the injectors and crank this thing over a little bit to try to build some oil pressure before starting it. So by the way, guys, I got my buddy Will here in the shop helping me out today. All the music that you're hearing on this video is Will's original music, so I'm going to put a link to his SoundCloud in the description. And what's the name on your SoundCloud, Will?
My name I go by the Fox.
All right, cool, man. We'll check you out. All right, let's see if this thing starts up. There we go. All right, so I got the engine back in the car. It's sitting here running. It's March in Michigan, but it just happens to be 60 degrees today. So I am gonna take the car out and go break this engine in on 5 PSI. So thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned for part 4, where I'm gonna bolt some other mods onto the car to support 15-20 PSI of boost, and I'll cover those in the next one. Thanks.